afternoon, dear colleagues and guests. Today is the 11th of June, 2020, and my watch says 12:01. Let me declare open a session of the Dissertation Council, the defense of thesis by Bratash, Valentina, Sergeevna, for the degree of Candidate of Pedagogical Sciences, academic specialization 13.001, theory of education, including history of education. My theme, pictorial notes, noting as a tool for transformation of the education. Under order, Petersburg University, dated the 9th of April 2020, number 280/1, me, Moskovkin, Leonid Viktorovich, Doctor of Pedagogical Sciences, Professor of the Department of Russian as a Foreign Language and Teaching Methodology at St. Petersburg University, was appointed chairman of this dissertation council. Same order appointed members of the dissertation council. Let me introduce them. Under order, St. Petersburg University of the 23rd of March 2020, number 230/1, our meeting is held in the remote access mode, which includes my colleagues, members of the council. And the same order appointed members of the dissertation council. Let me introduce them. Astronomer Svetlana Nikolai, Doctor of Psychology, Professor, Head of the Department of Personality Psychology at the Petersburg University. Can you see and hear us? Yes, I can. Kaditskih Elena Ligavna, Doctor of Pedagogical Sciences, Professor, Head of the Department of Russian and Foreign Literature and Teaching Methods at the Yapka State University. Elena Ligavna, can you see us? Yes, we can. Excellent. Irina Natalia Mikhailovna, Doctor of Pedagogical Sciences, Professor of the Department of Basic and Secondary General Education at St. Petersburg Academy of Postgraduate Pedagogical Education. Natalia Mikhailovna, can you see and hear us? Bratash Katerina Yurina, Doctor of Pedagogical Sciences, Joint Professor, Department of Languages, University of Helsinki, Finland. Katerina Yurina, can you hear us? Thank you. And the degree applicant, Bratash Sergeevna, do you hear us? Yes, I can see and hear you. Also, online is the academic advisor of the applicant, Tatiana Gelena, Doctor of Pedagogical Sciences, Professor of the Department of Pedagogy of the Petersburg University. Tatiana Gelena, can you hear us? Yes, good afternoon, colleagues. I can see and hear you. Thank you. So, all members of the dissertation council, well as the applicant, are present, and we can all see and hear each other. Dear colleagues, since our meeting is held in remote access mode under the order of the 3rd of March 2020, 230/1, I invite all the participants to watch the procedure in case there's a technical failure and you stop seeing or hearing someone. Please inform me immediately, and I shall call a technical break until such issues are eliminated. If the connection with me is lost, I would like to ask Svetlana Nikolaevna on the list to call a technical break. If connection is not resumed, let her preside at the meeting. Do you agree? Do you council members? Do you mind? No, we don't. Thank you. Let's continue. To improve the quality of sound, dear colleagues, please switch off your microphones, but remember to switch them on, given the floor. Let me also inform you that our session is being recorded and broadcast online at the Petersburg University website. The speeches are being simultaneously translated from Russian into English or from English into Russian. The applicant's page currently reflects an email address to which anyone can send questions to the applicant regarding the thesis and send their opinion and questions to the degree applicant online regarding her thesis and the ongoing scientific discussion of her presentation. These questions have been forwarded to me by our technical department, and I shall read them out during the discussion. Questions should be related strictly to the applicant's presentation and the content, and must include full name, position, and a place of employment of the author. Questions that are not related to the scientific discussion, to the discussion of the thesis, the text or evaluation of the thesis shall not be presented. In accordance with the order of awarding the degree of Candidate of Science or Doctor of Science, St. Petersburg University, our Doctor of Science, approved by the local regulations of St. Petersburg University. The meeting of the dissertation is considered common if at least two-thirds of the approved composition of the dissertation council, but not less than 4 persons, take part in it. Our dissertation council consists of 5 members, all 5 present, all in the remote interactive mode. Audio visual contact has been established with all of them. Thus, there is a quorum. I instruct the curator of defense officer of the District Council Activities of all departments, Valentina, to draw up the attendance list in which the dissertation council members present shall be recorded and indicate their work mode. In this case, remote. Let me set forth the procedure of today. And 14. Closing remarks to the applicant. Not more than 2 minutes. Dear colleagues, Do you have questions or objections to this procedure? If there are no objections, let's switch over mobile phones and please follow time. Keep your mic on when speaking. Thank you for your understanding. Let's start running the meeting. The floor is given to the academic advisor of Bratash, Valentina, Doctor of Pedagogical Sciences, Professor of the Department of Pedagogy, St. Petersburg University, Valentina Tatiana Gelly. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Let me introduce to you our degree applicant, Valentina Bratash, graduated Vologda State University in Cultural Studies. 2014, she won the Polny Institute of Liberal Arts, and 2016 successfully completed the master's program at the beginning of her professional activity connected with Center Series, where over the period of 4 years she became the heart and soul of the program. 2017, Valentina Sergeevna is a doctoral student at Petersburg University. A sketchnoting as a theme allowed her to combine creative and scientific interest. While working on her thesis, Valentina proved to be a very daring scientist. 9 articles, including articles published in Web of Science and Scopus, reflect results of her research. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Tatiana Gelievna. Thank you for introducing the applicant. You will be given the floor again, and after the Dissertation Council members present their reviews. Now, I have to say a couple of words about the degree. The thesis by Bratash, Valentina Sergeevna, a degree of Candidate of Pedagogical Sciences, Academic Specialization 13.01, Theory of Education, including History of Teaching Education, on the theme Visual Notes, Sketchnoting as a tool for transformation of the educational text, was accepted for defense by the order of the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University, dated the 9th of April 2020, number 2804/1. Bratash, Valentina Sergeevna, wrote her thesis at St. Petersburg University under the guise of Doctor of Pedagogical Sciences, Professor, the Department of Pedagogy, Valentina Tatiana Gelievna. Number of applicant publications set out the main scientific results of her thesis. According to the submitted list, is 3. In peer-reviewed scientific journals from the list approved by the Ministry of Education and Science of Russian Federation, 3 publications. In journals indexed in the Web of Science and Scopus scientific databases, no publications. The applicant submitted to the Academic Secretary of Petersburg University a full package of documents for acceptance of the thesis for consideration and defense. All the documents comply with Article 12 of Section 3 of the Order. All the documents submitted by the applicant, according to the information I received from the operator, comply with the requirements and are kept in the applicant's attestation file. Copies are available from the officer of the Decision Council Support Department, curator of today's session, Natalia Yurovna Rubkova, who's currently applied. Before giving the floor to the degree applicant, do you, the Decision Council members, have any general questions for the applicant? And is it necessary to close and review the entire list of documents submitted by the applicant? It's a question for everybody. There are no questions. Then, since there are no questions, I'll just give the floor to the degree applicant. Let her start. taking part. Yeah, I think. Please start the presentation. For all questions should be related strictly to the presentation. Well, welcome, Valentina Sergeevna. The floor is yours. Thank you very much. Let me start the presentation. So, dear Chairman, dear Dissertation Council members, before I start my talk, I'd like to thank all of you for being present on online format, which in a few months evolved from an unusual to a completely independent format. Today, let me present to you my analysis on the theme Visual Notes Sketchnote is a tool for transformation of the educational text. The relevance of the third topic connected with the active development over the past 2 decades of the new formats of visual representation of the text, presentation, infographics, laundry, visual notes, the phenomenon called text manipulation, and became not only a tool for business negotiation, various conferences, but also a subject of active discussion by teachers and changes taken are also important for organization of the educational process school, but learning mainly related to the text of educational content. In this regard, to find a balance between traditional text culture and the use of new text format in the educational process. Search for such balance is found in pedagogical research. Attention to the expectation of the teenager who lives in the digital reality. Need to increase trust in the texts of the new nature by parents and teachers, and possibility of developing the students' skills in working with graphic text, using text of new nature. The results show that Russian students have difficulties working with graphic text. The existing scientific work related to the text of literature are mainly of descriptive nature, so research is required that accumulates empirical data. Since the text is a quite broad theme, we decided to focus on sketchnoting. The graphic expression of the other's thought through the combination of words, drawings, and typography, figures, and design elements. Importantly, it does not require technical support. In our study, we assumed that visual notes can be considered as a form of text system typical for different historical books that prevalent visual promise of information in particular visual notes characterizes the current state of the historical process. Sketchnoting, the tool that is a transform the text is relevant and in demand in the modern learning activities. On the basis of the hypothesis, its purpose, object, subject, and goals we formulated. Let me present provisions for the defense to solve the first problem. A wide range of scientific works was analyzed. This analysis allowed us to generalize the phenomena similar to noting the history of culture, such as today sketchnoting in different spheres of human activities, science, culture, education, is also part of modern visual communications. Is a basic creation of social communities and processes. As it can be seen in this slide, they have wide coverage. Boundaries of usage led to the conclusion that visual notes are a form of text and a tool for its transformation. In order to characterize the modern stage of transformation of the educational text, scientific works related to the notions of transformation of educational text and material in the theme of visualization, new literacy. As a result of theoretical analysis, the notion of transformation of the educational text has been described in reflection of the historical cultural processes. Transformation leads to the emergence of new forms and ways of preserving information. The modern stage of transformation is characterized by the inclusion of visual in the structure, which is not only meaningful and informative, but also form an integral part of it. From the point of view of the activity approach, transformation of the education text in the activity aimed at recoding the text. The purpose of this activity is to rethink the educational information and or to create new texts, and it is directly to a number of educational tasks related to the development of the ability to work with graphical. In order to confirm our assumption that sketchnoting tool for text transformation and the demand in educational activities, we analyzed, regulated the educational activity. Special attention was paid to the materials of a new draft version. Since the standards are based on a systematic and action-oriented approach, we focus on the analysis of tasks, that develop creative abilities of each student, and formation of skills to work with graphical information. The federal law on education assigns educational institutions the right to promote experimental activities in the field of education, introduce and apply new technology. And in this, we see relevance and demand for the inclusion of sketchnoting tool. Review the established and only including the pedagogical practice tools of transformation of text allowed us to build the features of modern tools. This includes the possibility of building a verbal statement in the format of the text, the structure of which involve the code. Such texts of this nature imply greater flexibility and variability, support creative group work mode, and provide but require higher level of training from the student and the teacher. The most effort consuming, but not least interesting task, was studying mechanism of processing and understanding of pictures. The first stage, the pilot study of students' attitude towards text in the formula for their notes. The second stage, eye tracker was used to identify features of perception, processing, and understanding. The third stage was aimed at identifying possibilities of sketchnoting as a tool for solving learning education problems. Let me talk about this. Participants were asked to select one of 11 sketches created by the author of the research and evaluate the visual material by 3 criteria: positive features, difficulties or risks that may arise in the process of work, and prospects of using the visual notes in the training session. A total of 97 students from 9th, 10th grade of the Center of Serious Center participated in this. It's important to say that the second phase conducted together with students participating in the Big Test 2018 problem and colleagues involved in cognitive research. We're working with eye tracker from 13 to 18 years old, 10 boys and 11 girls. That was conducted in real time on an eye motion fixation machine. They were offered pre-selected stimuli for study. 89 trainees and 4 final texts and biographies of each poet. Designated Tippus, sketch of the linear type of and a radial sketch biography of Mandelstam. After each of the 4 texts, they selected 10 keywords on 7 questions and also evaluated on the scale from -2 +2. Average time per participant was 35 minutes. 9 people related to creating sketch. They trained to create visual notes, created 2 outlines, and a week later, the participants saw their outlines on the screen of eye tracker. Methods of data collection, processing, questioning, a question of 5 questions immediately after the end of the survey, eye movement registration, question and answer method. The participants' eye movements were recorded while reading both the sketch and the text. It took about 40 minutes. Let's proceed to results. Several observations were made on the basis of 5 side. Firstly, modern students have interest in working with the text in the format of visual notes. Secondly, help from a teacher needed to learn how to interpret the sketch and to create. Thirdly, a wide range of opportunities for using sketch have been identified. Learning text is a plan for a new topic or lesson for repetition, creative or verification task. Characteristic features of reading and text in the form of visual notes include the following statement. Structure of the sketch plays a starting role in the student's perception of reading and linear text requires significantly more time than reading the text in the form of visual notes, regardless of the structure. After considering the sketch, the reader answers factual questions about its content better than after reading a linear text. According to the participants' objective evaluation, the sketch is perceived easier. Results of stage 3 confirmed data obtained in the second stage of the study. And then the fifth and sixth problem of the thesis variants of the visual notes within the limits of education as curriculum activity described. Now, methodological recommendations on the use of visual notes as a tool for transformation of educational text. The complex of practical classes text includes both exercises and creating visual notes in workshop, working with text sketch format, games, the science of dead poets, and creative tasks. Approbation of the free formats was at number 319. Part of the extracurricular ISO text is recommended to be held in the workshop, the self-study sessions, to develop the ability to transform text into visual notes for better understanding of the content. The developed complex can be used at schools as a tool to perform various tasks while working with the text. The result of the test that working with text can encourage teenagers' interest and activity in the learning process. Summarizing the material, I may say that the objective of justifying the use of sketchnoting as a tool for transforming and educational text has been achieved. The theoretical material collected empirical data, positive dynamics of the results, testing three forms of work with visual notes convinced us that sketchnoting can be used as an effective tool for transformation of the educational text and acts as a independent format for the educational text, which allows us to talk about the confirmation of the main provision of the hypothesis. In conclusion, I'd like to point out the way forward. Topics presented in this column partly touched on the work, but didn't fall into the focus of present research, but a number of data show that the relevance of the prospects of work in this area. Dear Chairman of the Dissertation Council, dear members of the Dissertation Council, my presentation is over. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Thank you, Valentina Sergeevna. I would like to ask, let's proceed to questions regarding the presentation. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions regarding the presentation? I see there are no questions at the moment. As I see Svetlana has a question. Please, dear colleagues, it's such a pleasure to be with you, with this pedagogical group. And Valentina Sergeevna, as any interest in work, it raises questions, or maybe of clarification. Maybe psychologically you were prepared, eye tracking. So I have a question in this sphere. There are three of them, but maybe it will be easier to ask them all together. The first, in the pedagogical study, eye tracking is used very seldom. This is a new thing, and maybe which strengthens your work. But how will you, in general, evaluate the contribution of this method into your results? How justified is the use of eye tracking, and how the results that you obtain indeed strengthened your work? This is my first question. The second question is, now presenting your results for the main stage, you also said that you used eye tracker to analyze perception and processing and something else. So can eye tracker be used to register how information was processed, or is it an exaggeration? And my third question is, what do you think, in your opinion, peculiarities of perception of notes, notes obtained with eye tracker, how different they are from if your participants analyze other visual pictures or images in different format of visual images. Or do you think you would have obtained similar results? Because it depends on psychological, neurophysiological peculiarities. Are the questions clear to you? Yes, I note. Thank you, Svetlana Nikolaevna, for such in-depth, because the use of eye tracking was a tool and novelty, because uh, verification with such data at this point is new. So let me start how justified was the use of eye tracker data updated with eye trackers enable us to compare data, how a person views the text. It was important to understand if the methods of interaction with the text were different, and indeed they were different. There were differences. Also, the data obtained with eye tracker verify and support data and assumptions we made in the beginning of our study. So that was interesting. It was so it was interesting to see if there is any difference and to see specific features of reading. Is it possible to register processing text with the help of eye tracker? Indeed, it's a difficult question. It's not possible to give a definite yes, as text is processed in the eye, but indeed we may register the process of reading, how it occurs, and if there are any differences between reading linear text and visual notes. And in this case, maybe it's too brave to say that I wanted to confirm certain proposition. Maybe it would make sense to soften this statement. And the third question, use of visual notes based on preceding. So I worked before 2017, having experience in processing text graphics. And so we analyzed how children read infographics and how to use decoded infographics. And we found that after that study with that infographic was very different from what we used in the study. And for interpreting, for reading visual notes, we tried to make the text comparable, and the data obtained in previous, but there were some unique features connected with visual or interpreted visual notes. So, for example, a portrait, using portrait of a person in it. So it was justified. Thank you, Valentina Sergeevna, for such in-depth analysis of my questions. But I invite you later to think on my third question, because all our studies show that perception to a greater degree are connected with psychological and physiological features. Different people work with text rather than with specific features of the text. But thank you for your answer. Thank you, Svetlana. I would like to ask Elena Olegovna, would you like to ask something? Natalia Mikhailovna, Mikhailовna has a question. Can you hear me? Valentina Sergeevna, here's my question. As I was listening to the presentation, what do you think? Your comments to identify mechanisms of perception and processing, understanding of visual notes. Is there any connection between skills learned by teenagers and method they use to read linear text? Is there any significant impact? Is there any increase or maybe acceleration of reading and understanding of linear text? Or are the two different processes? I'm interested in your opinion. So maybe that was not exactly the focus of your study. Thank you. Thank you for this question. Yes, indeed. This is a very interesting turn in the study. Working with visual notes, we wanted to analyze how reading visual notes will be useful and how it will affect students. But your question enables to look at this issue from a different angle. My answer will be positive because I'm an optimist, because reading in general is a process, as mental activity, and of course it's important to quality texts. So we try to approach how an educational text and how many textbooks. So we in the class moment. And so in that sense, I would like their connection to be there. We have not studied it specifically, and how they. So we don't know. We didn't study how the skill of interpreting visual notes, how it affects the desire to read books. Thank you. Thank you, Natalia. Alumna and Valentina for your answer. Yurina, do you have questions? No. Dear colleagues, you have no questions. Let us proceed to the next phase of our session. No questions. As the next stage is reviews. Let's proceed to the discussion of the thesis. Let me remind you that all the council members, they submitted their review. But in addition, we received two external from Kuchina and Pinadna from Yaroslav State Pedagogical University, and Valentina Hakainen from St. Petersburg State University. Since these reviews were published at university website for viewing, I would like to let me read key points. Questions. Do you have any objections to these, dear colleagues? No, nobody has any objections. Okay, first, before I let me give the information about these two. The first review was sent by a Doctor of Pedagogical Sciences, professor of the Department of Russian Literature of Yaroslav State Pedagogical University, named after Ushinsky, Tatiana Gennadievna Kuchina. The author of the review comments on relevance, practical and theoretical of the work. She says that relevance of the theme leads to the need to solve the main tasks of the study, which include identifying mechanisms of perception and understanding sketches and integrating sketchnoting into teaching practices at schools. The author of the review is there has very positive opinion, especially the experimental part of the study. As the philosophy of the player, and yet there is just one comment regarding uh, the trainees of series are not typical school children. These are talented with great potential creativity teenagers, where the many educational tasks cope easier than their peers because of high intellectual capacity and having all the necessary competences. Besides, they were selected to be enrolled in series programs, and when experiment participants are selected, we are dealing with double selection, which means the results are very different from average values in a population. So this is a general comment, which maybe the degree applicant should answer. Yet the author comments on validity, and as a result, the reviewer mentions scientific novelty, relevant, and concludes that degree applicant Bratash Valentina deserves to be awarded academic degree of Candidate of Pedagogical Sciences, Specialty 130001, Theory of Education, History and Teaching and Education. Second review was submitted by Elena Rihatainen, Doctor of Philological Sciences. Sergeevna is an associate professor of general linguistics named after the Verbiskaya of Petersburg University. And Elena Igorevna is her specialty is psycholinguistics, and in quite recently we come across references to her experiments. And Elena Igorevna mostly is interested in psycholinguistic aspect. She says the thesis by Valentina Sergeevna combines linguistic and psychological approaches by no doubt contains data for future further understanding of the issue of perception and its role in the educational process. She mentions that this study enabled the degree applicant to make some conclusions in the process of reading visual notes, which in the future shall be used for creating skills. So this experimentally verified it's most for best sketch diagonal is not easy for the reader, and the portrait of the main character often draws the attention of the reader, while titles, even capitalized, the participants did not note. The participants do not pay attention to the title, even when they are capitalized. The author also says that all these observations based on the based results of analysis of the substantial material. Further, the reviewer says that a number of interesting makes a number of observations on, and her general conclusion is that Bratash Valentina deserves to be awarded the degree of Candidate of Pedagogical Sciences, specialization 130001, theory of education, including history of the teaching and education. So these are the two colleagues. I have a suggestion. Of course, we have to ask the applicant as well. I would like the degree applicant to answer all the questions, comments together. Do you have any objections to that? No objection. And how is that with the degree applicant? Is that okay with you? Yes, I absolutely agree, and I'm ready to answer to take all the questions in the end. Excellent. Then let us start hearing the reviews of the council members. I'd like to say that we have the right either review, but we also may shorten them, focus on the main point. This is our right because all the reviews have been published at the university website and they are available. So we may shorten it. I invite Svetlana Kostromina to present her review. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. If you don't mind, my review indeed has been published at the university website. So I'd like to focus on the main, most important points rather than read the whole review, because I think it's more important to note something, the most important things about this work. Maybe avoid some formal parts. First of all, I'd like to note that nothing is happens by chance, and the fact that this defense is taking place now that the internet became a key element of our educational activity shows how relevant is this study. Digital technology are taking greater and greater place, and this indeed is they are a part of our life. This is obvious. Maybe in 6 months we shall see what place is now occupied by the digital technology in our educational and pedagogical practices. But it seems to me that the value of this work submitted by Valentina Sergeevna is connected not only with the development of the new educational technology presented in the thesis, but with her focus on the second side is of how the information is perceived and processed. On the one hand, teachers more and more use the internet for their lessons, but on the other hand, modern generation of students that participate in the education process, they are different. They are different. They work since the time they were born. They have been immersed in the digital environment. There are qualitative changes in the way they process information. Modern students, they can live online and offline at the same time. They more and more we find situations where digital gap, which we use as a term, which means our young people are more immersed in the digital environment, in the teaching processes, it manifests itself differently. Most of these peculiarities are connected. For example, teachers, they complain that students absorb information differently. They use the information differently. Often we perceive these as drawbacks of mental activity, but in reality, these peculiarities are connected with the fact that students work with digital information differently. And in this regard, of course, we are on the edge, or maybe already we have entered the digital didactics. And in my work, some of Valentina Sergeevna is dedicated exactly to this complex problem, to the understanding how the modern students work with modern information carriers, the new nature, text of new nature. Of course, it seems to me that sketchnoting in this work is only an example, as one out of numerous formats, but the work itself is much deeper, and it shows how important it is for us to understand how the modern students read information, process the information, and transform it, and how we should teach them in this regard. Tasks set, and we saw that in the thesis, have been achieved. But what I would like to mention, of course, the in-depth work with the main category operators of the study, all their main concepts are clearly defined. What, from the point of empirical study, is important, an important task. Thus, for me, as a reviewer, I had an opportunity to compare with their validation and how they have validated, tested, confirmed, or this. And the obvious task, the obvious advantage of work is the present multi-layer empirical component. I would not use the concept experiment because, as a psychologist, first, the experimental study requires certain better, clearer structure, but the groups identified group logical structure sequence, moving from goal to result to prove the main provisions, put for defense. Each discussion, each assumption is validated with a sufficient number of empirical data, which were presented in a slide to us today. So we may see how efficient, how attractive, how efficient sketchnoting is when used in teaching practice. Clearly, though this work is new, let me focus on scientific novelty. I think that scientific novelty of the work lies in the fact that the author discloses the function of sketchnoting and proves its efficiency of in this work. I saw that the main principle of which plays an important role in education is developed. Maybe could be transformed and put into practice as a resource which teachers, educators can use in different spheres. And using eye tracker is an advantage of this work. And another evidence is verified can be used as a means of introducing educational information as a tool instrument for testing knowledge, and as well described in these sketches is a model for further methodological developments. As a result of the study, the author describes conditions of using sketchnoting, potential of using visual notes, analysis of mechanisms of text reading. So the contribution from the point of novelty is beyond any doubt. And if we talk about scientific practices, it seems to me that the positive picture of this thesis is that the applicant tried to explore sketchnoting as a process and as a result of activity. And such an approach enabled her to show a wide range of opportunities, of visual aids, from the point of summarizing the meaning, from the, that the educational process has time limitations, for increasing the information load, using how this can be used to draw students. So what are the challenges? Thus, of course, in this sense, scientific significance of the work, its theoretical significance, is, in my opinion, includes is a resource for practical that can be applied practically, because empirical justification of sketchnoting in chapter 2 and examples of methodological developments taken notes for educational activities in chapter 3 will be in demand with the educators. The work contains a lot of material that can be used for practicing educators, young researchers who are interested in this theme, in creating texts of new nature, and regardless of the advantages which I mentioned already. As any complex work, it raises some questions and critical remarks. Let me read them first. The author claims to rely on activity approach and theory of learning. However, from the whole paragraph, a couple of pages devoted to this question, which is absolutely unclear how the theory of learning activity and activity approach relate. The structure of learning activity and its main components are not described. It is not clear what is the difference between the subject of learning activity and the subject of cognition, and what is the benchmark for the author, what types of learning activities, learning strategies, conditions for mastering learning activities. The author focuses on analysis of state educational standard instead of the paragraph devoted description of transformation of educational text from the standpoint of an active approach, and instead of analyzing the structure of learning activities and their relationship to step-by-step learning, it all comes down to formal experts from the federal educational standard. It's a shame, really. Second, some points of the empirical part of the study also raise questions. Here I have several points. Despite a detailed description of the sketch development processes, paper doesn't provide statistical data on consistency of expert evaluations of stimulus material. Taking into account that the sketches used turned out to be different structure and content, it's not possible to assess the correctness of the choice made. Why these sketches, the choice seems to be subjective. Sampling is scarcely described, not clear whether the subjects were prepared. Today we heard that many of them were talented teenagers, but formally the results could be affected, such as educational background, what educational program they studied, how they performed, their physical characteristics, left-handed, right-handed, use of eye tracking. So, for example, what their data, no data about their eyesight, movement of eye was registered. What were the time limitations? In each of these factors could have affected the result. And I mentioned already, my next question, how correct is to call the precision experiment? It doesn't say, the word doesn't say it's dependent variable, which were independent. That the influence of factors and conditions was controlled. Was there a control group? Was it still an empirical study? Would be it would be better to call it an empirical study rather than experiment. Why? Why the author not analyzed the, for example, font size, for example, saturation of text, and so on. It's only the influence of handwriting on peculiarities of perception. And finally, there's one more point. The author uses the Gardner's method of multiple intelligence but the he does not provide information on reliability and validity check after the breached the method. Can the results obtained on the basis of is it possible to take questions out from a and rely on questions obtained, on results obtained, and some, in my opinion, some conclusions they have no empirical basis. For example, the author argues that when considering a sketch, a learner better extracts facts and rises content when reading a text. Would be interesting to clarify how the author has reported that it's extraction and analysis rather than memorizing information that has already been extracted and structured, or another conclusion on page 91. For the information from the title to be memorized by the reader, it must be repeated in the text itself or sketch. So how does what does this have to do with attention distribution? We're talking elementary repetition. The more frequent they are, the better the reader memorizes. And so it has nothing to do, it doesn't matter if it's a headline or not. But I think the questions that I asked, they are points for discussion or clarification, clarification, because the subject is very interesting. So it will be interesting to hear. Conclusion, thesis by Bratash and Sergeevna on visual sketch noting as a tool of transformation of text corresponds to the basic requirements set by the order of academics degrees at the Petersburg University. And the degree, Bratash and Sergeevna deserves to be awarded the degree of Candidate of Pedagogical Sciences, academic specialization 130001, theory of education, including history of education. Article 11 of the above mentioned order has not been violated by the author. Thank you. Thank you, Svetlana. I would like to ask Yelena Olegovna Galitsky to present her review. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to do the same thing, focus on it, and maybe focus on the methodological approach, pedagogical. I was very impressed by the method of translation of textual text into such a brief visual instrument as presentation. I think the contents of the thesis is quite modern, unique, and as a result of impact on the author. I had the impression that Valentina herself has mastered this interesting method and managed to demonstrate the text of her thesis. And by hearing her, listening to her presentation, we saw the author's approach to the results of her work. Contemporary education resulted in pressing need for studies of a new type. These are very brave studies, very modern, very up-to-date, very dynamic, and methodologically well facilitated. And fortunately, there are works which not only face the challenges of the time, reflect such challenges to a degree. And I will repeat wonderful speech by Anna Nikolai that I agree with her opinion, that I share her opinion that the is very relevant, and the results, the methodological results will be demand among educators and textbook authors, and I'm positive among modern educators, secondary and higher education. The tasks set by the author have been reflected in the provisions put for defense, and that is very important. The theoretical significance of the study is causes no doubt, because it includes scientific analysis of visual notes and is very interesting. Sketchnoting is graphical representation of the author's ideas with the use of words and images. In addition to that, the author transformed educational text into a cultural and activity approach. So I saw this, and I think it's quite well well reflected in the results. So the educational capacity of sketchnoting, transformation of educational text. Here's which enhances understanding and remembering the text for practical significance of the results and the methodological novelty beyond any doubt. Let me omit characteristics with students because this has already been described, discussed, and activity of the children is quite well described as well development of forms of integration of school pedagogical practice during classes and after classes, as novelty of the results, which is good features of visual notes as a social cultural phenomenon. Use the author's methods, systematize the theoretical material, enrich the pedagogical material. Like to emphasize scientific with significance of the results, which made a contribution to contemporary didactic methodology of teaching, theory and methodology of higher professional education. And Yaroslav Pedagogical School is working on that. Impressive experimental work. And I would like to say that the thesis by Valentina is from the analysis of the thesis is so I have not asked questions because my questions which I already included in my review, and with your question, to what degree in your take into account in your research the theory of multiple intelligence, the ability of students to choose how to work, see the traditional linear text when solving academic problems. To some degree, my question is similar to the question by Natalia Mikhailovna. The term you introduced new didactics. Sketchnoting is a tool of transformation of the educational text. How it is accepted by native speakers of the Russian language? Is it possible to simplify it in the Russian environment? Is there any semantic boundary between visual notes and sketchnoting? Or from your point of view, these are synonyms? And finally, what do you see specific features of using visual notes and materials in understanding text of fiction, or the possibilities of sketchnoting are universal? So let's proceed to the conclusion. The thesis by Bratash, Valentina Sergeevna, in visual notes, sketchnoting as a tool for transformation of the educational text corresponds to the main requirements set by the author on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University. And and Bratash from Sergeevna deserves to be awarded the degree of Candidate of Pedagogical Sciences, specialization 130001, Theory of Education, History and of Teaching Education. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Thank you, Elena Olegova. Let me ask Natalia Mikhailovna to present her review. Thank you. Dear colleagues, let me present my review with some comments and omit what has points already mentioned by my colleagues. I see no point to talk about relevance of the work. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that today, in the situation in which our education is, the work by Valentina Sergeevna, Bratash, is very multi-dimensional, psychological, sociological, deals with unification, working in remote access mode. It became even more relevant. And of course, this issue somebody needs to be dealt with. Is and I think the value from the point of practical value will increase during the summer by several times. Very natural that in work, the work suggests a specific method of interaction with students and teenagers. This has been tested to best degree, to the way possible for the cases. And also another point, another aspect which I included in my review, but also would like to mention contemporary school education, the education activities of the students, extracurricular. It's easy to see number of occupations, and sometimes this is not because teachers cannot teach and students don't want to learn. This is because this phenomena is like skills of optimization, and that and I think that the tool proposed by Valentina Sergeevna is one of the ways of dealing with this challenge. Is a way of dealing, or as a tool for optimization of educational work. My opinion is a old story between theoreticians and practitioners who have been looking for methods, forms that will accelerate understanding of texts, save time of students, teachers, and parents as well. And in that search, the aim is always the same, is to accelerate mental activity of students, organize absorption of information, and gaining knowledge. And in that sense, visual aids, especially for teenagers, because if motivation changes towards educational changes, we all know that perfectly well, and we know peculiarities of teenagers, and Valentina Sergeevna took them into account, and this is very easy, it's very visible in your thesis, that each step of the technical version is, of course, affects education, and sometimes they are successful. This impact good, sometimes it's not. The practices that can be useful and instrumental to teachers and students is the first educational television now has become thing of the past, and educational programs there no longer relevant today. The form of this individual education is growing, and of course today the relevance of educational practices cannot be overestimated. In the past 2 months, we saw that exactly such educational practice will be in the inclusion of the possibility of independent to understand the information independently without the, the need to have an adult teacher. Because these are methods without an adult teacher. These are methods of optimization of educational practices, and the work of Valentina Sergeevna is evidence of this. The study of Valentina Sergeevna is, I think, she is not only the pedagogical component, though of course this component is very strong, but also because Valentina Sergeevna, as an experienced educator, despite her age, I saw her work, how she worked with teenagers at Sirius, and it's always important how the degree applicant herself is interacts with the teenagers, the subjects of experiments, and how Valentina Sergeevna, at every stage of the experiment, this respect for the children, for their comments, for movement of the eyes, opinion, how significant for the work with Israelis is for if he used after master classes, so all these things together are valuable because this means the addressee of the is getting respect. So we understand, dear colleagues, that addressee is not so much a teacher, but the student, of course, because for optimization of teaching practices, the aim is to make understanding more efficient. So for that reason, great number of pedagogical studies have been conducted. Also, I would like to say that I will not focus on each chapter of the thesis. So this, what I would like to say is that, in my opinion, the structure of the thesis is very well structured. I saw, as I was reading this work, I saw the logic, structure of each chapter, a sequence of paragraphs connected with aims of the work, scientific task introduced in the introduction. And here, I think it is important that the author explains with the user help of results and requirements to achieve specific results, the results of specific subjects. So to me, that seems, it makes the work not only modern and up to date, makes it a scientific paper. It is not only a suggestion, but it makes sense to apply these tools, this unconventional approach. I'd like to focus on what would be important in the pedagogic, in my opinion, for the students, for future teachers and parents, for teachers working at schools, colleges. I think instrument would be very useful for teachers and students at colleges, or if more so, a number of annexes, and annexes are real. Um, they really contribute to the work. It will be for libraries, as a matter of fact, and educators in additional educational problems. The structures are for additional materials on sketchnote results of the main. So this will help the teachers to understand the possibilities of this of the opportunities provided by this instrument. And I'll also say that is what I liked is the order of experiments, pedagogical experiments. I think efficient for me. And here, it's quite clear the experimental components. It's important that Valentina Sergeevna, for me, it was important that Valentina Sergeevna could clearly identify regularities. I was not surprised by that at all. What school is falling behind what contemporary teenagers see and do, and in any subject they learn at school. But still, I would like to say that the colleague, that the author, conducted a significant work with the structure of visual notes. I think because we know, especially the teachers working with schools, we know well how hard it is to attract attention of modern contemporary students, not of older students who are motivated, but of teenagers who this is a separate group from the point of interest, how involved they are in educational process. And so we know that very hard to create a text, to create a video, a picture that will draw the attention of teenagers. And that and to retain this interest as well. And in that sense, of course, wonderful that the author, Valentina, managed to achieve working with the structure of visual notes. And let me repeat that serious attention to the reaction of teenagers to their reaction of what is, makes this work not only our scientific paper, but a living study, a life study. So I think it will be very relevant. And I think teachers understand that they will necessary to move and further. Also, I'd like to say that focus on chapter 3, the use of visual notes as the instrument of extracurricular activity, because it's aimed at two directions of education, making sketches and working with text and visual notes. The author defines the movement as follows: include, involve both the teacher and educator, introduce visual notes in class and curriculum activities. This is very important. And the class format the author implements in the context of literature classes. So that's very interesting for me. I watched this very closely. The author introduces by our planning of ISA-text workshop and provides step-by-step comments and generalization It uses tables and figures. The tasks of this ISATEX workshop can be used in curriculum and extracurriculum activities. It's interesting for librarians because I work, so they are looking at new instrument work. Also, I'd like to, Valentina, I beg your pardon. I would like to, because we have some time limit. So could you please make it a bit shorter? Yes, so let me proceed to questions. From my review, it's obvious that I have a very high opinion of the work, and yet I have some comments which are recommendations. The text of the work repeatedly indicates the age limit of the focus group participants, pilot experiment, and then the methodological recommendations for teachers define the age when it is recommended to start working with visual notes. Fifth grade. Was there such an experience of working with children of this age on the topic of the fifth? What's the basis for recommendations to start working with visual notes at the fifth grade rather than, for example, at primary school when children have not yet learned to connect their own imagination to texts read in school? Second, will the recommendations and conditions proposed by the teachers in Chapter 3 change according to the age of the students with whom the educator intends to start working with visual notes? Paragraph 3.3. Third, how will the above recommendations be affected by the teacher's desire to improve personal and academic outcomes for students? Does the applicant have any perspective in terms of our ability of approach to implementation? These remarks do not affect the overall positive end conclusion. The thesis by Bratash and Sergeevna in visual notes as tool for transformation of the educational text corresponds to the basic requirements set by the order on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University. And the degree applicant Bratash again deserves to be awarded the degree of Candidate of Pedagogical Sciences, specialization 130001, General Theory of Education, History of Teaching and Education. Article 11 of the above has not been violated. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Natalia Mikhailovna. I beg your pardon for interrupting you. Ekaterina Yurievna, please present your review. Thank you very much. The thesis by Valentina Sergeevna takes us to the depth of change of text as written, maybe illustrated, a sequence of letters perceived audio. Linguists are arguing between difference between text and discourse. At that, both can be written and oral, and the difference lie in the context, situation, purposes, means, and methods of analysis. The new paradigm of reality, a priori denied, can be from different devices, not equal to itself, occupy more space and should be ignored. Information is not retrieved. Evaluations fluctuate. There is no canonical attitude. Contemporary pedagogical approach gives the opportunity to analyze education, give more space for critical text analysis and visual notes. It's not revolution, but a very revolutionary, but very convenient form of addressing various tasks. The main channel of perception here is vision, and with sketchnoting, the student as a competitor of the author not only become equal to him, but exceeds his accuracy of expression and potential memorization. Being more on this instrument can be transformed into important for future professional invention used in different spheres. From linguistic position, it's important to understand plan of and address to visual perception channel can be one of the application of semantics. In addition to that, we know that the work text transformation, no match the forms, is an important task for someone who is the cornerstone of language capacity. In my opinion, these provisions make the thesis extremely relevant. It's good impression. It's well thought, with a sincere desire to understand from the theoretical and pragmatical value. A significant result of the work is that out of three main sketches, trajectorial, uh, linear, ray, and also the trajectorial works better. And which could be this result could only be achieved with the help of eye tracker and more convenient for other visual representation. Logical part, like to post-interview, a very rare but seldom used instrument. The method was tested at educational center Sirius and Sergeevna. Provided recommendations on sketching are very include uh, keywords, graphical separation blocks, prohibition to use placing text diagonally, and portrait will be useful to introduce these conclusions to the teachers who use a method of sketchnoting in their work. These coincide with principles taught to illustrators and placard art. It's also worth sketchnoting notes made for oneself and those computer and comparing when the cost with notes. Strange, the author doesn't mention aesthetic value of material representation, which has a high motivational role. One of assessment criteria, sketchers, they were fascinated by the beauty, creativity, design, page 69. How to meet this criteria is a big question. In this case, situation, different computer programs could be more or less successful instrument. So we believe that the quality of image had not did not have that significant. Some schematic drawings. Students abroad learn per se while creating cartoons, cartoonex, and captions, and make it post. Many times we read that there are certain national preference especially liked nouns with the help of key elements. This is similar to the primitive and visual metaphors. It's surprisingly, the biography of poets, which because Russian culture is a very centered literature. It's possible that sketchnoting would replace taking notes, but certainly it should be taught. Abundance of and variety of statistical methods increase status of the study. Also, the thesis contains many specific practical recommendations, sharing not only her own but other resources that can help teachers in class and extracurricular activities. This new vision of stages. Some provisions of the thesis, though, are mainly asked questions, and there are some contradictions that when cultural historical approach to the evaluation of visualization as an ancient phenomenon and the use of the term text of new nature, because the analyzed study is not always text on the computer. It seems impossible to compare the use of dictionaries reflecting certain terms in Google, Yandex, because in this case, such a comparison is not normalized throughout the volume of text viewed. It doesn't seem necessary to me to achieve an emotional response to each text. On the contrary, the emotionality of perception often damages objectivity. And while reading the thesis, I had a number of questions on which I would like to know the opinion of the author. It's known that Russian school children are often confused about what the author said and what they themselves think, as embodied in the training the idea to very accurately separate the author from their thoughts. Let's say that some visualization methods are easier to perceive than others, and sketching is easier than text. Is it possible to conclude that you should always use only the simplest method of presentation, or need to be able to perceive information from different, including complex and organized sources? If different methods are used, what should be the relationship between them? And finally, what do you think about streaming? What is the difference between visualization of long read and visual presentation of streaming? Generally, the study makes very good impression, and it's a comprehensive, high-quality work. Thesis by Bratash and Sergeevna on visual notes as tool for transformation of educational text corresponds to the requirement set by the order of 1st of September 2016, number 21/1 on the order of awarding academic degrees from Petersburg University, and the degree applicant, Bratash Valentina Sergeevna, deserves to be awarded the degree of Candidate of Pedagogical Sciences, special session 130001, the theory of education, history of teaching and education. Article 11 has not been violated. Thank you. Thank you, Ekaterina Ivna. And my review, I have, I'm in a very good situation because you have already mentioned what I wanted to say, so my presentation is very brief. So I would like to say that provision on awarding academic degrees lists the criteria, list the criteria. They correspond to national criteria, and I may say that this thesis, by novelty, relevance, it has theoretical and practical significance. I did not get any serious objections to validity of results, and I heard some comments regarding the experiments as the expert in methodology. But I saw in this thesis I had no objections to, because for this study, experiment, linguistic experiments, pedagogical material, it seems to be. At the same time, I'd like to say on the theoretical significance of work, because I think this has not been mentioned before. I'd like to say that this thesis makes a contribution to the theory of educational text. Educational texts exist as long as the educational system itself, but the theory of educational text are relatively new. In the 1970s, the first significant serious works were published, and at the same time, many spheres have not been well studied. And Valentina Sergeevna focused on transformation. It seems very important to me, and not for Russian, but also for teaching for a Russian language to foreigners. They say this is very important. Built this a long time ago. This issue has to be addressed as the verb methods. There are works like that, but it has. This is a contribution indeed. The transformation of education in chapter 1, theoretical foundation. So I think the fragment in the future will certainly be informed, or it will expand because it's very complex. Give me an example. When we work with students, especially from China, we find they especially have taught text transformation, while our students actually are taught to do that. And this skill is something they need to learn. This is important. Also, I'd like to say that in general, the work has made a very favorable impression. It's very easy to read, and the author maintains good balance between scientific tone and like is the author is a very able writer, very good. Speaks of her potential. But what I would like to say, of course, I had the same question, and I have to ask the same question. So let me repeat it. The question is connected experimental basis of the study, the experimental educational center series, where students specially selected. Can your recommendation be applied to usual city schools, also schools in difficult conditions such as rural or incomplete? Is there any specifics of using visual notes in these conditions? But in general, I would like to say that this thesis on visual notes, sketchnoting as a tool for transformation of educational tech corresponds to the main requirement set by the order on the 1st of September 2016, on the order 6821 on the order of one academic degree at St. Petersburg University. And the author, re-applicant Bratash, deserves to be awarded the degree of Candidate of Pedagogical Sciences, Specialization 130001, Theory of Education and Teaching of Education. Article 11 of the above-mentioned order has not been violated by the author. And now I would like to ask the applicant to answer all questions and comments. Thank you very much, the Dissertation Council members. Thank you for your questions and remarks. Let me give my answers. I will start with questions. Okay. Start with the answering questions and then finish with Svetlana Nikolaevna on history of to state educational standards caused by the fact that this is a system activity approach. Since it was important for us to justify the possibility of using text of a new nature as tools for working with text construction, analysis of the educational standard, we focus on finding the necessary prerequisites for this. I accept the comment on summary theory and learning activity and further development of these topics seen as promising direction for the study. Question of stimulus material. Lack of statistical data, consistency of expert evaluation of incentive material is due to a very limited number of potential experts, namely teachers who are experts in sketchnoting. Given this difficulty, we had to be guided the following criteria. All texts were compiled specifically for experimental study with the use of eye tracker were based on the same representation. All texts were adjusted for word count, reader age, and readability. However, we hope that there will be no problems with experts in the very near future. Question about the subject. At this stage of the study, it was important for us to establish general trends rather than individual differences, presence or absence. That is why a relatively homogeneous group was formed. Of course, we understand that deeper research requires more individualized longitudinal study. I very hope that in the future we will have the possibility. On a term experiment, agree it would be more correct to call a material empirical study. Factual based. Yes, of course, we think there could be such an impact, but the certain task of the study we have outlined is a description and analysis of pedagogical possibilities of sketchnoting. However, we don't rule out a more detailed description of the factual basis would be appropriate. On reached methodology, reduction number of questions will focus on nature expectations. Since the survey was conducted online and the collection of answers depend on the willingness of social to devote their time to this completion, we decided to reduce the number of questions, 45 to 36. I'd like to note that synonymous statements were reduced. Probably, if we had conducted the surveys face-to-face format, we would have been able to fully reproduce the methodology by dividing the questionnaire into two stages. A conclusion. Control question for 21 respondents was formulated in such a way that even with a sufficiently developed memory, a person would have to compare the text presented in the text and to carry out the analytical activities. Comparing our results with Nelson's study was the basis for clarifying the role of the title. It's really only concerning because there's a key attention of the reader focus on the title. And concerning distribution of attention, we agree that in our concept it's more appropriate to talk about the peculiarities of perceiving the visual notes. Questions by I thought maybe such short questions you were given, such long questions you're given such short ones. Let's proceed to a question by Sergeevna on multiple intelligence in the parallel between sketch theory and multiple intelligence. However, the modern theory assumes that diversity is taken account. Sketchnoting is one of the tools for breaking with text. We proceed from the understanding there's a connection, several types of intelligence: visual, spatial, verbal, linguistic, kinetic, and intra-individual. Question about the terms. Thank you. It's important to clarify that we didn't set ourselves the task of introducing a new tone into scientific use. It was important for us to characterize visual notes as a social cultural phenomenon and the possibility of using them in educational practice. Analysis of sources in Russian and English led us to the conclusion that visual notes can include sketch taking, which involves the idea of sketching a record. We share the opinion of Sergeevna about the experience of search for Russian-speaking analog, but it's hard to pronounce, and we don't rule out that this is a method in the near future. Question on the potential sketchnoting in fiction. Tries to the best possibility of sketches and educational text, work in information-rich texts and texts of fiction as way of reflection. Theoretical studies is the potential of visual notes is deep in subjects on the scientific side. To speak about specifics, additional comparative research is needed. Questions by Natalia. Question on age limit. Students from 8th to 10th grade took part in the testing. Based on the feedback from participants, became clear worth stating to get acquainted with the text in the form of visual notes and gain experience for their creation. In the 5th grade, based on analysis of the state educational standard, ability to create, ability to transform symbols, modern scheme to solve educational and cognitive problems as personal results, and readiness to ability to solve development and creative. This is a promising area, and in the theoretical analysis, we have encountered works that offer sketchnoting in primary school, and in published online courses on sketchnoting, joint students in 4th grade, indicates the interest of students of primary school to this format. A question on using sketchnoting depending on age. In our recommendation, in paragraph 3.3 of general pedagogical nature. So we may assume that working with students in the 5th to 7th grade is worth paying more attention to joint work and moving rather away from the interest of the group. The possibility of creating is chosen by each person. In the future, more attention should be paid to the functionality of reading and creating visual notes, the ability to memorize the basics of visual literacy. Question on results. The use of acquired skill of reading and creating visual notes in a project and research to school children, for example, presentation of scientific report. Very promising. Very impressed by the idea of variability of proposed adapted recommendations to the total masterclass, vice versa. It's really important in working with sketches during the year. Should be relied on creating online courses. Questions by Ekaterina Yurievna. The text of the new nature is our understanding fixed on some medium for displaying the related symbols, signs of verbal, non-verbal nature. Appealing to the cultural historical approach allows the phenomenon into the process of changing the text culture and show that this is not an isolated phenomenon, but results of process of transformation of text as a whole. A question on term analysis. Analysis of the number of references of visual notes and sketch noting is due to the attempt to reflect how widely distributed and replicated these concepts on the internet were. Google and Yandex are leading search engines. In contrast, the results obtained are wanted to show a relatively small number of scientific works in the topic, especially in the Russian scientific community. A question about emotional response. So it was not important if students are interested. We didn't set ourselves to analyze the emotion. Authors and own ideas. Mixing the author's own position is a relevant problem related to the level of philological education. Sketchnoting is a tool that helps visualize the level of understanding and analysis of the text. At the same time, sketchnoting allows to clarify whether everything is in order with the understanding, or the student has difficulty separation of author's own opinion, express their own aspect to the text. The different graphic elements are used. Text balloons entering the image of the etc. Ease of understanding. Adhere to the idea that a modern person has skills of reading different texts. In this respect, calculate the ratios to exaggerate the importance of some text formats over others. We think that the key idea is to keep the reading process constant from text to text. A question about storytelling and long read. If I may, the answer will be, from the perspective of a researcher interested in developing visual text, long read offers thorough and beautiful reading. It's practical, allows to build deep references, visual materials, hypertext. In long read, the physical absent from a human storyteller. In this regard, an emotionally strong impression can produce a visual emphasis, especially when the narrator has acting skills. It seems to me that a visual component is an important part of long read, and visual, in both cases, visual material can both interest the reader and distract him. And questions of Leonid Viktorovich, question about universal. Yeah, I think our answer could be positive. Theoretical conclusions about the multifunctional nature of sketchnote. On the other hand, to the presence in our sample not only of students, but also students from schools. Speaking of rural and incomplete schools, it seems to us that visual notes can be a useful tool too, because the creative nature of the activity. However, understand that the answer can only be true to recommendations in practice. Thank you. Questions of Christina? Double selection. I'd like to say that is to take part in the experiment, science and art. They are not professional, and since we advocate as an alternative instrument the selection of students, so we were selected by readiness to work with unusual texts, and that will be interesting to continue. Thank you, dear colleagues. I have thank you for your questions, and I'm going to comment if necessary. Now I have to ask members of the dissertation if everyone is satisfied with the answers. Svetlana Nikolaevna, are you satisfied? Yes. Yes. And Elena Olegna, are you satisfied? Yes, thank you very much. I like answers. Natalia Mikhailовna, yes, I'm quite satisfied with the answers. And Ekaterina Yurina, yes, thank you. I'd like to say that I only had one question. I'm also satisfied with the answer. Now, I would like the Natalia Yurina to tell us if Natalia can hear us. No questions or receive the question. So that makes our life easier. And then, dear colleagues, we have the opportunity before voting to call a technical break to discuss the results with the sound off. Do you think we need such a technical break to discuss the results, or the situation is clear? I think the situation is clear because there were no negative reviews. So if necessary, we. Anyways, Nikolana, do you think we need? No, I agree. We don't need a technical break. We had the opportunity to ask all questions, get all clarifications. What do you think, Natalia Mikhailovna? I don't need. I think we don't need this. You know your opinion. No, we don't need a technical break. Thank you. Thank you, colleague. Then I put the question of awarding to Bratash Valentina Sergeevna the degree of Candidate of Pedagogical Sciences, Academic Specialization 130001, Theory of Education, History and Teaching of Education, to the open individual vote. Let me remind you that a decision of the Education Council shall be considered positive if more than, but not less than 3 members of the Council present at the session vote for it in accordance with Article 23 of the Order of awarding academic degrees. Council member Sergeevna, your opinion. Are you for awarding the degree? Svetlana Nikolaevna? Yes, I support. Council member Radisky Yelena Olegovna? I support the work and I vote for. Council member Spirina Natalia Mikhailovna, your opinion? I vote for awarding the degree. I support the work. Council member Bratasova Ekaterina Yurievna, your opinion? I support the work. I vote for. Thank you. And myself, Jim Moskovkin Leonid Petrovich, my opinion is for. I support this work. Thus, dear council members, dear colleagues, let me announce that out of 5 members of the Education Council, 5 voted for, no one voted against, and no one abstained. The decision to award to Bratash gave the degree of Candidate of Pedagogical Science, Academic Specialization 13001, Theory of Education, History of Education, has been made. Dear colleagues, since our meeting held in the remote access mode, I have a question. Do Dissertation Council members or the degree applicant and others present have any comments on the procedure of the? I have to get this from everybody. Svetlana Nikolaevna, no comment. Elena Olegovna, no, I don't have any comments. Natalia Mikhailovna, no comments, thank you. And Ekaterina Yurievna, no comments. Thank you. Thank you for your answers. Can we give the floor to the degree applicant for the closing remarks? Leonid Viktorovich, the scientific advisor, broke the procedure. I forgot that the academic advisor has to speak. What shame. I beg your pardon, Tatiana Gilievna. Please say what you have to say. Dear colleagues, thank you for your comments, for your reviews, for your active participation in the discussion. I think there is no doubt that Sergeevna Bratash is a competent, modern, brave, strong, independent researcher, and all the comments that were given regarding each relevance and methodology and tasks, objectives, and theoretical, logical basis. I was to give some statistics. So, and the picture that you already have, that totally over 1,000 students and respondents totally took part, including educators, school children. Also, I'd like to emphasize the practical significance, which is strengthened by the potential use, and during the study, over 600 participants got not specific skills of working this tool. Thus, I'm glad that we made this study, and I'm sure it has a great future. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And now we'd like to give the floor to Valentina Sergeevna for her closing remarks. Dear Dissertation Council members, I'm very grateful for such in-depth analysis of my work. It was very important for me, especially thanks for finding time to pass all the challenges with online defense procedure. I'm very grateful to my academic advisor, Tatiana Gelievna, for many things would be impossible without her guidance. That happened. And thank you for having the opportunity to conduct this study, guiding me in the right direction. I am very grateful to laboratory because this work with I'm linguistic materials and I'm very proud that 2 minutes ago I became an honors member of the scientific community of St. Petersburg University. That's an honor for me. Thank you. Thank you, Valentina Sergeevna. We were awarded. So we decided to award to you the degree of Candidate of Pedagogical Sciences, and that on behalf of all members, I can congratulate you, or maybe each council member would like to say something. I think at that, just finish our session. I declare the session closed. I thank everyone for participation. Please stop online broadcasting. Then we may log off.